President has declared a ban on travel between the U.S. and Europe. Fears about coronavirus are higher than they've ever been. We will break down all of the latest for you on this issue. Try to avoid as much of the politics as we can and get into what really matters coming up.
We have the best economy, the most advanced healthcare, and the most talented doctors, scientists, and researchers anywhere in the world. We are all in this together. We must put politics aside, stop the partisanship, and unify together as one nation and one family. As history has proven time and time again, Americans always rise to the challenge and overcome adversity.
Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everybody. It was a tough night last night for those of us who were watching. That was some of the president's address to the nation last night from the Oval Office. It was a bit of a wake-up call, I think, for many of us. Now, let me start by saying that I have not changed my overall outlook here in the following way. I think that panic is not helpful. I think it's not warranted. And it is my belief that as long as we do everything that we can, and everyone does everything that they have been told will mitigate this virus, we will come out of this on the other side okay. I mean, we're definitely going to make it through. It's just a question of what damage will be done along the way. And we are seeing for the first time in the Trump presidency what I would call wartime Trump. This is a wartime issue. This is something that affects the lives of millions. Well, it affects all of our lives. So every single American is in some way affected by this. We all have loved ones who are in the higher risk categories. We all know people who are older and immunosuppressed, and we have to protect them. And there's a lot of government policy that comes into play here. It is distressing to see, and I'm going to try to avoid the petty partisanship. There are political arguments that are happening right now that we have to have because there are measures that are being taken. There are policies that are being debated in real time, as I'm here speaking to you, that will affect how we deal with this and also will help determine whether this is a crisis that we look back on and say, we did pretty well or we got sucker punched. We weren't ready for it. We were not in a position to handle this properly. If we were talking in virus terms, you all know the DEFCON system, right? If we were speaking about this in terms of a virus or a pandemic, I mean, I'd say we're at DEFCON 3. We are at an elevated state of readiness here. We're at DEFCON 3 technically is the U.S. Armed Forces ready to deploy in 6 hours. And it is an elevated state. We are in an elevated state right now. It's interesting that the biggest outbreak was in China. We know that. The biggest outbreak has been in China. And of course, those of you that can see me on video now, every time any of us touch our faces, which is very hard to avoid, you just think, oh gosh, what have I done? The biggest outbreak was in China, but it's Italy that I think has really rattled people. The stories coming out of Italy are gut-wrenching. You have triage situations where, and this is now being reported on in lots and lots of news outlets across the country, triage situations where they simply don't have the medical resources to handle the influx because they got hit by a whole bunch of cases all at once. And now there are stories of the military trying to airlift people from the north of Italy and the other parts of the country. Look, there's obvious reason for concern, but there is not reason for panic, and those are different things. We have to keep this going. Last night, I will tell you that as I was listening to the president's speech, even I had a moment, and I fired off a tweet. I was like, oh my God, this is a pandemic, pray for us. And then I deleted it right away because I thought, what, come on, shield's high. It's got to mean something. Now is when it really tests us, right? Now we see who we are as a country and what kind of emotional and mental fortitude we have as individuals when called together in collective action. wars, pandemics, there are only a few things that really bring us all into the same boat, and there's no way around it. And we are in the midst of a pandemic right now. And if the situation in Italy, where there are also stories about people who are not in the high risk population in terms of their age or being immunosuppressed or having a comorbidity, if that hasn't been concerning enough for people, and that should be very concerning because you have stories, at least anecdotal at this point, but people who are in their 40s and 50s who are in the ICU. Has that been verified? How many? I don't know, but this is now circulating, and there's also a lot of hysteria, and there's a lot of fake news circulating around about this. People also turning on each other, and this was I think my initial frustration, my greatest frustration, because I was faced with the liberal mentality on this a few weeks ago when I went out and I traveled on an airplane. It was right when people were really starting to get worried about coronavirus. And it was clear that there were, including Bill, that the liberals around me, and it was everyone on that stage except for me, was an avowed leftist liberal, that their primary concern was to bash not just Trump, but also really to mock and ridicule anybody who is holding out faith and hope that the administration's doing everything they can. Not because I think they're so great or so perfect. And I could pick apart this administration's personnel, and I will pick apart the CDC later on this show. I used to work for the CIA, which, if you're talking about a government organization that has its pick in terms of hiring and what feels like almost unlimited funding for the mission a lot of the time, and there was mediocrity, ineptitude, waste, abuse, and stupidity all over the place. Does anybody really think the CDC is like a bunch of super antivirus ninjas? Well, we already have some information that's come out that, yeah, they're helpful. They do some good stuff. I'm not saying that we don't, I'm glad we have a CDC, but it's a reminder that if we're really going to beat this thing, it's going to take a lot more than, no matter what kind of government agency action could have been mounted to help us in this process. But it was troubling to see. And I'm going to try, and I'm not going to be perfect, and I'm going to say that right up front. I'm going to try to avoid taking jabs at the other side, even though, and they're on offense here. The anti-Trump movement in this country, the never Trumpers, the Democrats, the left, the socialists, all the loons, the people that have been out marching in the streets for years, they can't help it. They're in a frenzy of barely subdued delight that they think this is going to finish off the Trump presidency and deliver it to the Democrats. It's appalling. It's disgusting. It's not surprising, though. But I want to push back on their lies without trying to own them, as the kids say, without trying to take any cheap shots, anything petty. I'm not going to be perfect in this because I'm only human, too. And, I still remember my message, if you ever saw it on the show, on Bill Maher's show, was we all want the president to succeed here. We want no deaths. This is about more than politics. And I came off and I was getting liberals writing me, I hope you get coronavirus and die. That's where the left-wing mentality has been on this all along. Never mind at this moment where we're particularly anxious about this. Understandably so. So I'm going to try to make a promise to you, because we're going to be in this now for the next at least 30, probably more like 60 days, where this will be the dominant theme, the single news story that overshadows. Does anyone even really, remember that we're in the midst of a presidential campaign right now, midst of a presidential election? Is anybody even really thinking about that? And I'm not saying they should be focused on that. We do have more important things right now. So while I'll talk about the politics as it affects policy, and I will have to push back on some of the lies and the unfairness, I will aspire on this show. I always aspire to be. I do have to sometimes call people out and say that people are being dumb when they're being dumb. I mean, there are limits to this, right? But as a guiding principle, I will aspire to be not just fair-minded about this, but also keep our Look, I'm not also just going to talk about coronavirus all day. I can't do that. That's not worth your time. Every day we come on here when this continues and we're facing this pandemic, we'll do some updates, what matters, what's going on, where are we, and then we're all going to talk about other things. And, producer Mark and I might even have a little gallows humor in here sometimes. I mean, we're going to have to do that. Because if you're going to spend your time with me, it's not just going to be the blaring headlines that you're seeing all over the news, meant to panic people, drive up ratings, keep everybody off balance and worried. That's not what we do here. It's never what we've done. So I'm really trying to recalibrate a little bit back to the core mission of making sure that I give you all the information I can on this, that this is a place where I'll give you analysis. I mean, obviously, you go to any website and they've got the number of confirmed cases, and I'll inform you about that, but also where are we really here? And this is where it also matters that, we all feel like a community. So I'll really appreciate all of your, I know that there are, I can think off the top of my head of a handful of world-class infectious disease specialists or immunologists or microbiologists who I know listen to this show. So those of you who have thoughts, who want to share your perspective, please do write in. Because we are hunkering down here. I mean, this is going to be battening down the hatches for a while. Producer Mark and I have been talking about how we're going to find a way to keep this show on the air no matter what, because there's still talk. I mean, we're here in New York City, which has this big cluster of cases out in New Rochelle. But I mean, I just got off the subway before I came on the show, and yeah, there are less people, but there are still people because life has to go on. We got to still keep doing what we do. And look, if I could stay home, if there were possibilities here that would allow us to continue doing everything we do without anybody being around anybody, I'd probably do that for the next 30 days, but that's not how it is right now. But if something changes, we'll find a way to make sure that our show goes on the air each night as it has been. We're making contingency plans for that because I'm going to tell you this right now. I mean, and I'm being completely serious. If I end up having to quarantine just because of an exposure, God forbid, even actually contracting this thing, as long as my lungs have air in them, I'm doing this show. I mean, as long as I have the physical capacity to do it, I will continue to do the show. So that's where we are on that. Also, last night, there wasn't just the president's speech. There was a bit of a double whammy effect. It felt like piling on. You had the news break that the NBA has canceled its entire season. It is very, very likely as I go to air that the NHL season will also be canceled. And you had Tom Hanks and his wife, Rita Wilson, I believe, both in Australia and confirmed to have coronavirus. So you've one of the, arguably the most famous and celebrated American actor, not just of his generation, but some would say in the world. I mean, he's certainly in the top 10. It'd be Tom Hanks, Tom Cruise, maybe some people put Harrison Ford, whatever. That doesn't matter. The point is, this guy's super famous, and that brings it home for people. That makes it seem more real, I think, to a lot of folks. This recognition, all of a sudden, that anybody can get this. It does not matter. This is a human disease. It does not matter, how rich, how underprivileged, what country you're from, what nationality. We have to do everything we can to use the knowledge that we have to try and defeat this thing. But the NBA season is canceled. Tom Hanks has this. St. Patrick's Day Parade in New York, St. Patrick's Day Parade in Boston, South by Southwest at Austin was already canceled. Coachella out in California has been canceled. Major sporting events, NCAA tournaments going to be played without fans in the stands. I mean, just go down. I mean, we are in lockdown. That's where we are. Let's just be honest about where we are with each other, right? This is the situation. And you want to minimize contact with other individuals. You want to minimize, certainly, travel. All the things that you're hearing from the CDC, because it's all about playing the odds and playing the numbers, right? Doing the most you can, not just to elevate your own odds. Remember, this is where we do have an interdependency here. We all need to make sure that we take care of ourselves, because in taking care of ourselves, we are better capable to take care of others. And also we are less likely to unknowingly expose others to possible infection. So this does start with the self. Each and every one of us has some degree of responsibility. Another point that I think we all need to remember: the number of cases you see right now is a fraction of the people that are walking around in this country today who have coronavirus. No one knows what that fraction is, but you will not find a single health expert who thinks that we know about every case or even close to every case. And if you look at a heat map, which is, a map that shows density, right? So if you look at a heat map of the corona cases across the country, I was poring over one this morning. It's all over the place. You're reading about it a lot in Washington and in New York, but this is all over the country. And this is something that we will need to confront as Americans right now if we want to avoid the situation that's playing out right now in Italy. There are reasons for optimism. Optimism, not that it's not going to go away. It's not a hoax. By the way, Trump never said it was a hoax. And this falls in the category of got to push back on the crazy a little bit. Never said it was a hoax. They've been working on this. And the testing problems we keep hearing about are a CDC problem. The CDC in the manufacturing process, whatever that means, messed up the initial testing kits. South Korea has gotten a pretty good hold on this virus. China has brought the curve down. Doesn't mean it's totally gone. It has brought the curve down. This also means that this virus will probably be something that we have to deal with for the foreseeable until a cure or a vaccine comes up. And that could be a lot longer than people think. Yeah, I said this to you, and I wasn't trying to be glib, but how's that common cold vaccine coming on? Now the cold is hundreds of different viruses, and that's part of why it's very hard to get a vaccine for it. But this could be more complicated than we think it is, just because it's going into human trials early. Look, it's a positive sign. I'm not trying to ignore that, but we need to stay absolutely focused here on what we know, and we need to take care of each other. I literally just got an update from producer Mark right after I said, yeah, the NHL has canceled their season. So, and other sports conferences, right? Who else is
suspended? The NBA
suspended.
and NHL are both saying suspended.
Okay, so it could come back theoretically.
Yes. And we've got conferences like the Big 10, Big 12 canceling their conference tournaments. NCAA still is on to play without fans, but that might be in question now.
So looks like you're going to have everybody just get ready for it. Waves and waves of cancellations. Stay home, Netflix, video games. That's what we want to be doing here. Read. Stay away from people. Social distancing. These are all good practices. They're not perfect, and they're not absolutes. If you got to go out, you got to go out. You got to get food. You got to do what you got to do. But these are all good practices to have.
The game tonight has been postponed. You are all safe. And take your time in leaving the arena tonight and do so in an orderly fashion. Thank you for coming out tonight. We are all safe. And you can visit OKCThunder.com for updates on upcoming games.
So sports are in rough shape right now. We got cancellations. We just talked about the NHL suspending, as producer Mark has pointed out, suspending the season. Other leagues are suspending. I mean, if they suspend long enough, it's going to be basically canceled. I wanted to bring in Clay Travis to talk to that issue, but also his thoughts on just everything we're facing right now. Clay is the host of Outkick the Coverage, very popular podcast, and also the author of the book Republicans Buy Sneakers Too. Clay, thanks for joining us. Are you in Nashville right now?
I am in Nashville. Appreciate you having me, my man.
Yeah. So tell me what's going on here, first off, with this NBA player who tested positive. I saw something that he also had made a joke earlier about having coronavirus, and it turned out he did. What can you tell us about what's going on with the NBA and coronavirus?
Yeah, Rudy Gobert is a player for the Utah Jazz, and he had made a joke a couple of days ago at a press conference about the coronavirus by, rubbing his hand all over the microphones that he was being interviewed on as he walked out. And obviously it was lighthearted. He was not taking it seriously. He got the coronavirus. He also has given it to at least one of his teammates. And obviously this has since spiraled into a major issue in the world of sports and beyond, because with the quarantine situation that everybody has, once one player on one team gets it, that entire team is required to quarantine, and so are, to a certain extent, all of the players who played against that player. So it has spiraled into a ongoing, I think it's fair to say, crisis for the world of sports, which is unlike anything I've ever seen before, where one by one different leagues and different tournaments are making the decision basically to call off their games.
What does this mean, you think? I mean, look, there's so many angles on this one, but let's start with just the health of the leagues, pardon the expression, but the financial impact this is going to have in arenas. I saw something that Mark Cuban is making an effort, he says, for at least for the Mavericks, to take care of hourly employees who are obviously going to be in really rough shape with the season being shut down. What can you tell us about how they're trying to mitigate the impact economically?
Well, I mean, I think that's a big challenge, right? And honestly, this is me putting my lawyer hat on. I'm already kind of, purely from a legal perspective, utterly fascinated to see what all these lawsuits and insurance contracts are going to look like. Because you could probably imagine this. For years and years, pro sports leagues have been taking out insurance in the event that something wild happens, which necessitates games not taking place, maybe the cancellation of seasons, and trying to figure out what the economic value of that would be. You probably pay, what do you think? I mean, I don't even know. I'd love to get an insurance expert on, but several $1 million to ensure that your season is going to continue to take place, but your payoff is going to be massive in the event that it happens. And it kind of reminds me of in terms of the unlikelihood of it, of what happened after 9/11. When for lawyers out there, they'll remember there was a big lawsuit over whether the two planes that hit the Twin Towers were one event or two events, because it impacted in a big way what sort of recovery there was going to be under the insurance contract. And I don't even remember what the resolution of that case was, but you think about the 30 different places out there, right? The 30 different NBA arenas and the 30 different teams and all of the different aspects of that they will have set up, and all the lawsuits that will unspool. It's just kind of massive to think about.
Now, are there any leagues that are right now planning to sort of just continue with contingency operations with no fans in the stands going forward? I mean, how are adaptations working here for any other sports leagues or any other events?
It's happening so quickly, honestly, that if I haven't checked my phone, I almost hesitate to say, because something might have happened in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, that actually just happened to me. I said the NHL is thinking about canceling, and then we came back from a break, and then turns out they're canceling.
Yeah, right. So I mean, I think that's the challenge, Buck, right now, is that literally it's almost impossible to keep up with how quickly this story is moving.
Now, I've also seen, you're somebody who has been pretty vocal on social media, and I'll just say, I mean, you and I haven't talked about this yet. I've been taking the position that, this is a be vigilant, take the precautions, but they're really, people say there's no need to panic, and that almost then incites panic. It's like Will Ferrell in Old School when he says, keep your composure, and he's like flinging the chair around the locker room and freaking out. Yeah. I think that there's a psychological effect that it has when people say don't, but I really don't, I think sometimes there can be a need for panic. There can be a need for everybody to hit the exits, and we're not there. I don't think we're anywhere close to there. Walk me through where, your evolution in thinking about the risks here as somebody who pays very close attention to the news, has been vocal about this. Where'd you start? And after what we saw last night from President Trump, and how worried are you, man? I mean, that's really the question.
I am not incredibly worried, all right? I think it's an interesting question, and let me just take a step back. I tend to be a guy, and you probably are as well because you're a smart guy. When I was a kid, I was scared of everything, right? Like a young kid, because you're aware that there is danger in the world, but you lack the ability to unpack probabilities and statistics of what that danger represents. So you're willing to go into the ocean a little bit. There's sharks out there, but you're not smart enough to understand what the chances are of a shark actually biting you, right? And so I was terrified of things like that as a kid. And as I got older, I used sort of my fear as the way that I would weaponize against it is by diving into facts and data in order to try to uncover the answer there, right? And so I believe that most of us are very safe, right, from this pandemic. Right now, according to the most recent data I've seen, there are 10 people in serious or critical condition in the entirety of the country. And there are 38 deaths, I believe. What's scary is if we went in the direction of Italy, which is about 75 times as bad when you adjust for per capita as what we have in the country right now, that would change. My hope is that we're going to move more towards what South Korea and China, how we're able to do in terms of virtually eradicating the outbreak in their countries, as opposed to towards Italy and Europe. And I think what Trump has done is basically say, hey, Europe is a powder keg right now. It's in danger of becoming China-like. And so we need to keep people from coming from Europe to our country and reigniting more cases going forward.
And in terms of the statistics on mortality rate and all the numbers that you're seeing, there's this big debate over, is it worse than the flu? Is it similar to flu? Do you have? I mean, I know you're not an epidemiologist or a doctor, neither am I. But from the latest data that you've seen, that you've been diving into, what's your take on the both the ability of this thing to spread comparatively to other diseases that we see that are like it, and the mortality rates? I mean, you mentioned Italy versus South Korea. How bad is it in South Korea?
Okay, so South Korea is the best case scenario. And the data that we have seen from South Korea reflects that if you get the coronavirus in South Korea, it doesn't matter how old you are, but obviously this impacts people a lot older, but 99.3 or 99.4% of all patients are recovering. That is, they are not dying, which would mean that 0.6 or 0.7% of people are dying from this. So that's the best case scenario, is what's going on in South Korea. And I tend to think that our medical system would be more similar to South Korea's than it would, say, to Italy's or certainly other countries. The fear that I think is out there is that the coronavirus, we're still learning the transmission rates. The World Health Organization has said that it is less contagious, the coronavirus is, than the flu. Okay, others have disagreed. I think this just reflects the fact that we're in a very early stage of understanding this disease. And so the question which is going to be asked, and I think will be utterly fascinating as we move forward, is why did Italy have the problems that they had? Now, maybe it's the fact that the country is older, right? Italy is one of the oldest countries in the world. They are very social in the way that they kiss, right? Like they are very close in terms of personal contact. They have a massive tourist crowd that was coming over from Asia. They may have had outbreaks that similarly broke out all at the same time. Their overall infrastructure at hospitals may be severely decrepit compared to other countries. I think this will be, for epidemiologists, an incredibly interesting study when all of this is passed, to try to figure out and learn for the future, what did South Korea do so well? What did Italy do so poorly? And which direction is the United States going to go in terms of being South Korea-like, where we basically end this outbreak before it has a systemic overlapping, deleterious effect for the country? Or are we going to spiral into a tailspin of ineptitude, much like has happened in Italy?
Now, do you think that it was the right move to cancel all these sporting events and arenas and stuff? I mean, if you were the professional sports czar for America, would you say, yeah, guys, we need to do this?
Well, I think Rudy Gobert put it all on steroids, because once you get a player who tests positive, then that team's going to have to be pulled out of competition. So I don't know that the NBA has any other options once Rudy Gobert tests positive. And I think that is why all these other leagues are acting the way they are, because they're saying, oh, we're going to have a player in the same situation as Rudy Gobert. Let's go ahead and keep this from happening. And I believe that is the biggest challenge that is out there, is we basically skipped a step. Because I think the step was going to go from no crowds, right, from crowds to no crowds, playing in front of no crowds. And I think that might have held for a month, or might have even been able to last for a long time, but for the fact that Rudy Gobert got the flu, which jumps you right from, well, playing in front of no crowds is not an option anymore. Let's just wipe out the whole season for suspension right now. Now, remember, it's not canceled, it's suspended. And so we'll see whether that suspension is lifted and we return to the rest of the season. Depends on how things go in the weeks and months ahead.
All right, everybody. You heard it from the man himself, Clay Travis. Check out his podcast, Outkick the Coverage. Check out his book, Republicans Buy Sneakers, too. Clay, thanks for making the time. Stay safe, hydrate, wash your hands.
Same for you, my man. I appreciate you having me on. Thanks.
We just had some breaking news. We're going to have breaking news throughout the show, I think, on this. The Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, is now self-isolating over coronavirus. Fears. He's not been confirmed to have it, but he's self-isolating because of concern that he may have been in contact
His wife has flu-like symptoms, so they're testing her. That's why.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to be even glib or funny about this at all. It's now you recognize more than ever how much you touch your face. And I'm sitting here and I'm doing a radio show, and we also broadcast it on Pluto TV, and it's really hard to not touch your face. Trudeau is the first head of state that I know of who has been. Look, we don't know if his wife has coronavirus. There's still flu out there, so there are people that have very similar symptom profiles to those with coronavirus who actually have standard influenza, which I would note is also not anything to be taken lightly. But we're just not. We know more about it. We know that it's considered a less serious disease than coronavirus at this point. So it's possible that his wife has just the flu, but obviously everyone right now is very concerned that anything that seems like it's flu is going to be. And also, look, I'm not trying to make some big political statement. It's coronavirus is a family of viruses. That's not really it should be called Wuhan virus, so we know what we're talking about. Wuhan virus is what causes COVID-19, and no one really is going to call it COVID-19. So I'm not trying to make some big political statement. I just think that we call all these other diseases. I don't know why all of a sudden we're supposed to change. I mean, it should be called the Wuhan virus. But this is just, you got a head of state of a country right next door, our close friends, our brothers and sisters in Canada, and this is clearly going to get a lot of attention because if the wife has COVID, see, I just did it. If the wife has, I guess we're going to keep calling it coronavirus till we all agree we can call it something else. But if the wife has the virus, then there's a very good possibility that the Prime Minister of Canada, now, as we all know, he is young and healthy, so chances are he would have, statistically speaking, he would have something like a cold. It wouldn't be, that's what 80% of people have. They have some shortness of breath, they have a cold, and, it attacks their system, but they're okay. But there are other heads of state, including in this one, who are at an elevated risk profile because of their age. I didn't even mention this at the start of the show. There's so many things. They've shut Capitol Hill and the Pentagon from visitors, so they're still conducting business, but there have been some staffers on Capitol Hill who have come down, some Senate staffers, I believe. And there'll be more. I mean, if there's a couple of Senate staffers, there's going to be more Senate staffers. They're all moving around the same hallways, breathing the same air, interacting in these places. So it's very likely that you're going to see a number spike on Capitol Hill of confirmed cases. And we're Tom Hanks has it. We're going to see more people who you would think, oh, they don't have to worry. And I know that no one consciously thinks about this, but you think about very influential, powerful celebrities and politicians. It's easy to get in your head, well, they're not somebody that has to really worry about this. I mean, I'm pretty sure the flu actually killed a czar of Russia in the 19th century, and that's just off the top of my head. I mean, this stuff happens. Very famous, very powerful, very influential people can succumb to this. I mean, this is a human condition that we're all so concerned about. This is any human being is susceptible to this, and unless you are in a hermetically sealed box and having somebody bring you food that has been sterilized all the time, I mean, no one is perfectly safe from this. And I worry that that there are some panic points that I think are coming. The panic points are going to revolve around let's just say it, if Trump or Biden or Bernie or Schumer or Pelosi or McConnell or any of the notice I'm picking those names. Those are all not just powerful politicians in this country. They're all older. They're all pretty much, in their late 60s into the 70s, all the way up to Sanders is almost 80. And they're still shaking hands, although I think they're going to stop that. They're going to have to cancel all political rallies. They're effectively going to have to suspend, not cancel, because we understand the importance for professional sports right now, the difference. They're going to have to suspend the presidential election in a sense. Not all of it. People can still, write stories and put out their stuff online. And aren't we all, in a sense, very lucky to have the internet-enabled world that we live in, where we still have all this communication and instant information? And now I know there's a bad side of it because there's a lot of hysteria and panic that this is coming from. But I want to dig into what I what I think is, well, let's talk about some more of what Trump said last night, and then I'll also look at what's coming so that we're all prepared for it.